She stood at the edge of the porch, the autumn wind tugging at the hem of her worn jacket, eyes fixed on the horizon where the last golden leaves clung desperately to skeletal branches. The sun was dipping low over the small town of Millbridge, casting long shadows across the cracked pavement and modest homes. To anyone passing by, she might have seemed like just another weary woman trying to make it through the day. But to her son, she was everything. Maria had always been a pillar of strength, though life hadn't handed her much mercy. Raised in a town where opportunities were scarce, she worked 2 jobs to keep food on their table and a roof over their heads. Her hands bore the evidence of years spent in kitchens, factories, and cleaning homes, but it was her heart that carried the greatest weight. Her son, Daniel, was her entire world. From the moment he was born, Maria had vowed to give him a life far different from her own. One filled with hope, dreams, and the courage to fight for what mattered. She had no husband, no family support, just the 2 of them against the world. Daniel was 15 now, on the cusp of adulthood, but still a boy who looked up at his mother with wide, trusting eyes. He had inherited her fierce determination, but struggled under the weight of their hardships. The neighborhood wasn't kind to kids like him. Violence and despair lurked in the corners, whispering temptations he fought every day to resist. Maria's mornings started before dawn. She would kiss Daniel's forehead, whispering a prayer over him as he slept, then head to the diner where she worked as a cook. Every dollar she earned went toward their small apartment rent, Daniel's school supplies, and the little extras that made life bearable. A hot meal, a warm coat, a chance to dream. One evening, as the first chill of winter crept through the air, Daniel came home late from basketball practice. His breath came in hurried clouds, cheeks flushed, but his eyes were distant, haunted. Maria noticed immediately. "Hey, you okay?" she asked softly, setting down the groceries. He hesitated, then forced a smile. "Yeah, just tired." But she saw past the act. The bruises hidden beneath his sleeve, the uneasy silence that stretched between them. She knew the world outside was dangerous for a boy like Daniel, and she feared what it might do to him. That night, after tucking him in, Maria sat by the window, her mind racing with worries and plans. She would do whatever it took to keep her son safe, even if it meant breaking herself in the process. Days turned into weeks, and Maria's courage was tested time and again. She fought for Daniel to stay in school, navigating endless bureaucracy, standing up to teachers who doubted him, battling neighbors who whispered judgments. She juggled shifts at work, took on extra cleaning jobs, and still found time to be Daniel's shield and sanctuary. One afternoon, Daniel came to her with tears in his eyes. A gang from the neighborhood had threatened him, trying to drag him into their world. Maria's heart shattered, but she didn't falter. She took him in her arms and whispered, "You are stronger than they know, my son. We will find a way." Together, they sought help, a community center, a mentor, a coach who believed in Daniel's talent and character. Slowly, the darkness began to lift. Daniel's basketball skills improved, his grades climbed, and with his mother's unwavering support, he started dreaming again. Years later, Daniel stood on the stage of his high school graduation, the crowd cheering as he accepted a scholarship to a college far from Millbridge. Maria's eyes filled with tears as she watched her son, a testament to resilience, hope, and the power of a mother's love. Their journey was far from easy. They faced setbacks, heartbreak, and moments when giving up seemed like the only option. But Maria's bravery, the quiet, relentless kind, had carved a path for Daniel to walk into a brighter future. And as the sun set over Millbridge, mother and son knew that no matter what lay ahead, they had already conquered the greatest battle, holding on to hope when the world tried to take it away. Maria Hernandez woke up to the soft hum of the city outside her small apartment window. The sun had barely risen over the sleepy town of Millbridge, Georgia, but for Maria, the day had already begun. She carefully slipped out of bed, careful not to wake her teenage son, Daniel, who was curled up under a thin blanket, exhausted from a long day at school and basketball practice. Maria's life had never been easy, but it was filled with purpose. The purpose of raising Daniel into a man who could break free from the cycle of poverty and hardship that had gripped their family for generations. She had moved to the United States from Mexico when she was just 19, chasing a dream of a better life. She had found love, heartbreak, and eventually the strength to raise Daniel alone after his father had left when the boy was just a baby. As Maria brewed a pot of coffee in their tiny kitchen, the smell filled the air and mingled with the faint scent of worn textbooks and old sneakers. She knew today would be a tough one. Daniel had been struggling at school, not academically but emotionally. The neighborhood they lived in was rough, and Daniel had begun to face pressure from the wrong crowds. Maria sat down at the small kitchen table and pulled out Daniel's school report card. His grades were slipping, but worse than that, his eyes, when he looked at her, held something she couldn't quite understand. Fear, frustration, maybe even hopelessness. She took a deep breath and whispered, "You're stronger than this, mi hijo. We will get through it together." The day passed in a blur. Maria worked 2 jobs, one as a cleaner at a local hotel, the other as a cook in a diner downtown. The hours were long, and her feet ached, but she never complained. All she thought about was Daniel, his future, his dreams. That evening, when Daniel came home later than usual, Maria noticed his shoulders slumped, his gaze fixed on the floor. "Mom," he began hesitantly, "some kids from school. They want me to join their group. They say it's just for fun, but I know it's trouble." Maria's heart clenched. She had known this day would come. "Tell me everything," she said softly. Daniel explained how the kids talked about gangs, about making money quickly, about power. The temptation was strong, especially when the world outside their door was so uncertain. Maria hugged him tightly. "You don't have to follow their path. You have a choice. Always remember that." The days that followed were some of the hardest Maria had ever faced. She became more than just a mother. She became a warrior. She reached out to the school counselor, joined parent support groups, and found a local community center that offered mentorship programs for kids like Daniel. Every evening, after her shifts, Maria and Daniel would sit at the kitchen table, talking about his day, his dreams, and the man he wanted to become. She encouraged his love for basketball, enrolling him in after-school programs where coaches believed in him and his potential. Slowly, Daniel began to change. The fear in his eyes faded. His grades improved. His smiles became more genuine. One chilly December night, Daniel returned home, his eyes bright with excitement. "Mom, Coach says I have a chance to try out for the varsity team." Maria's heart soared. "I knew you could do it, Daniel. I'm so proud of you." Through every challenge, financial struggles, broken dreams, lonely nights, Maria's bravery never wavered. She fought not just for survival, but for hope. Years later, as Daniel stood on stage, clutching his high school diploma and a scholarship letter, he looked out at the crowd and found his mother's eyes. She smiled, tears glistening, knowing their journey was just beginning. The winter air bit sharply as Maria and Daniel walked home from the community center one evening. The streetlights flickered, casting long shadows on the cracked sidewalks of Millbridge. Daniel's breath came out in white puffs, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of his jacket. Maria noticed how quiet he had been during their walk. "Daniel," she finally said softly, "you've been quieter than usual. What's on your mind?" He hesitated, then looked up at her, eyes shining with a mixture of frustration and vulnerability. "Mom, sometimes I feel like I'm stuck. Like no matter how hard I try, the world outside doesn't want me to make it. It's like everyone around me expects me to fail." Maria stopped walking and turned to face him fully. She reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from his forehead. "I know it feels that way. I felt that way too. But remember, your past doesn't define you. You decide who you are." Daniel looked down at his shoes, biting his lip. "But sometimes when the other kids from school say those things, when they make fun of me for working so hard or trying to stay out of trouble, I wonder if I'm just fooling myself." Maria's heart ached. Being different isn't easy, Daniel. It's the hardest thing you'll ever do. But it's also the bravest. You are not fooling yourself. You're choosing a path that will lead you somewhere better. He looked up, eyes meeting hers, searching for reassurance. "How do you do it, Mom? How do you keep going every day, even when it's so hard?" Maria smiled, though her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "Because I believe in you. Because I believe that love and hope are stronger than fear. And because I want you to have a life I never had." Daniel nodded slowly, feeling the weight of his mother's words settle inside him. Weeks turned into months, and Daniel's dedication at school and basketball caught the attention of Coach Simmons, a seasoned man with a stern exterior but a heart that beat for kids like Daniel. One afternoon after practice, Coach Simmons pulled Daniel aside. "You've got talent, kid. But it's more than just skill. You've got heart. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Daniel's chest swelled with pride. "Thank you, Coach. I won't let you down." Maria overheard the conversation from the bleachers and felt a surge of hope. Maybe, just maybe, the tides were turning. But life, as it often does, threw another challenge their way. One cold night, Maria's phone rang. It was the landlord. The rent was overdue, and if she couldn't pay by the end of the week, they'd be out on the streets. Maria's stomach tightened. She had been scraping every penny together, working overtime, But with Daniel needing new shoes for basketball and school supplies piling up, the money had run dry. That night, Maria sat at the kitchen table, bills spread out before her, her hands trembling slightly. Daniel came in and saw her face, lined with worry and exhaustion. "Mom," he whispered, sitting beside her. "We'll figure this out. We always do." Maria hugged him tightly. "We will. I promise." The next morning, Maria called every number she had for extra work, went door to door offering cleaning services, and even spoke to a local charity for assistance. The community center's director, Mrs. Thompson, offered help, connecting them with a small emergency fund. Slowly, the crisis passed, but the fear remained, a reminder of how fragile their world was. Through every struggle, Maria never stopped showing Daniel what it meant to be brave. Not the kind of bravery that's loud or heroic in movies, but the quiet strength of getting up every morning despite the odds, of loving fiercely when life tried to break you. Years later, on Daniel's graduation day, Maria sat in the front row, her hands clenched tightly around the edge of her dress. When Daniel's name was called and he stepped onto the stage to accept his diploma and scholarship letter, she felt tears spill down her cheeks. After the ceremony, Daniel found her, pulling her into a hug. "We did it, Mom." Maria smiled through the tears. "No, Daniel. You did it. I just kept the light burning for you." As they walked out into the warm afternoon sun, their future stretched wide before them, uncertain, but full of promise. Winter had turned to spring in Millbridge, and with it came a new sense of hope. The days were longer, the air warmer, and Daniel's life had changed in ways Maria had only dared to dream about years ago. Daniel was now a young man, preparing to leave for college with a full scholarship. He stood in their small living room, packing his belongings into a battered suitcase. Maria watched quietly from the doorway, her heart full of pride and an ache she tried to hide. "Mom," Daniel said, looking up with a soft smile. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." Maria wiped away a tear. "You did it yourself, Daniel. I was just here to remind you how strong you are." He paused and pulled her into a tight embrace. "You're the strongest person I know. You fought every day so I could have a chance." Maria's eyes shimmered. "That's what a mother does. We fight, we love, and we never give up." As the day of his departure arrived, friends from the community center, teachers, and neighbors gathered to say goodbye. Maria stood by Daniel's side, watching him climb into the car that would take him toward a new life. A life she had worked so hard to create for him. When the car pulled away, Maria stood on the porch, the wind playing gently with her hair. She felt a mix of loneliness and immense hope. She whispered to herself, "This is only the beginning." Her phone buzzed. It was a message from Daniel. "Thank you, Mom, for everything." Maria smiled, knowing that no matter where life took them, their bond would never break. The brave woman who had faced every storm had succeeded, not just by surviving, but by giving her son the wings to soar. And in the quiet streets of Millbridge, her story lived on, a testament to love, resilience, and the unbreakable spirit of a mother's heart.